South Korea posted in June its largest current account surplus in some 7 years, over $12 billion, thanks to chip exports. The Korean women's table tennis team beats Sweden to advance to the semifinals at the Olympics for the first time in 12 years. Hamas names its Gaza chief Yahya Sinwar as its new leader, following the recent killing of its previous political leader. This comes amid heightened tensions in the Middle East. It's August 7th, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Korea recorded its largest current account surplus in some 7 years in June on the back of strong chip exports. Moon Tae-ryun starts us off.
With the semiconductor boom, South Korea's trade balance in June posted its largest surplus in nearly 7 years. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Wednesday showed that the country's current account surplus came to $12.26 billion. It's the largest since September 2017 and marks the second month in a row that the trade balance has been in the black. With this latest data, the current account balance in the first half of the year tallied up to nearly $38 billion, a notable rebound from the $1.1 billion recorded the year before during the same period. This far exceeds the central bank's earlier forecast, which predicted that the current account balance would log just under $28 billion between January to June this year. These latest figures for June were driven by a solid goods account of $11.4 billion, which marks 15 months of continuous growth and is the highest sum recorded since September 2020.
This comes due to continuous strong semiconductor exports, which reached an all-time high due to a rise in demand for AI-related industries and higher memory chip prices.
The goods account tracks imports and exports amounted to nearly $59 billion with thriving outbound shipments of semiconductors. Chip exports increased by more than 50% year-on-year, along with a rise in exports for information and communication equipment, petroleum products, and passenger vehicles. Imports, on the other hand, fell by 5% year-on-year and came to some $47 billion. However, the service balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, was in the red by $1.62 billion. In particular, the travel sector accounted for a deficit of $900 million, meaning that people were spending more to travel to other countries. Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of under $2.7 billion. Moon Tae-ryun, Arirang News.
In other news, efforts continue to ease the fallout from the recent e-commerce platform liquidity crisis. More measures were unveiled today, which includes speeding up refunds. An Sung-jin has more.
The crisis surrounding e-commerce platforms Tmall and WeMake Price still persists, with enraged sellers and customers looking for concrete solutions. During an economic ministerial meeting held on Wednesday, the government discussed additional measures to respond to the chaos as well as policies to prevent similar crises in the future.
The government has put together solutions for financial support. We will begin by completing the refund process for product buyers.
To assist the process, the government will be cooperating with credit card companies, electronic payment service providers, and travel agencies to give out refunds as quickly as possible. For those customers who seek a refund from travel, lodging, and airline companies, the government will also be collecting applications for collective dispute mediation by the end of this week and begin the mediation process next week. For vendors that haven't received payments, additional liquidity support worth 1.2 trillion won or $870 million will be provided from the central and local governments. Starting from Wednesday, businesses that have been affected can extend their loans and guarantees by up to a year. Meanwhile, to prevent another e-commerce crisis in the future, the government will establish regulations for e-commerce platforms to prevent them from using payments from vendors as liquidity.
We will be pushing for fundamental policy reform to prevent damage like this from happening again.
Existing regulations on retail and electronic transactions will also be revised so e-commerce platforms have a shorter payment period than huge retailers. Measures discussed in Wednesday's meeting will become more concrete within the month. Delays in payments from the two e-commerce retailers began in July when their mother company, the Singapore-based platform Qoo10, was reportedly in a tight financial situation. This led to unilateral cancellations of orders, leading to financial damage for both vendors and customers. More than 3,000 vendors have been affected, suffering total damages of 278 billion won, or roughly $200 million as of August 1st. An Song-jin, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., Wall Street closed higher on Tuesday, rebounding from one of its worst wipeouts, as investors seem to have calmed. Still, some voices of caution remain. Cha Yoon-kyung explains.
Groups on the New York Stock Exchange, including Nasdaq, appear to have closed within 1% of their net asset value on Tuesday. Among big tech stocks, Nvidia and Meta contributed the most with over 3% rises. 10-year Treasury rates rebounded too as the money flowed into safe haven U.S. Treasury bonds. The White House said on Tuesday that the broader U.S. economy is resilient despite some volatility, easing fears of a recession.
And what we have seen recently is consumers remain resilient and business investment remains strong. Unemployment, while up from 50-year lows, is still low at 4.3%.
However, the U.S. stock market as a whole turned downward and almost returned half of the previous day's gains. There was a new report regarding the credit card default rate in the U.S. soaring overnight to its highest level in about 13 years. An unwind in the yen carry trade, borrowing money in yen at a low interest rate and investing it in assets with higher returns is contributing to the volatility. As a result, there has been a heated debate on Wall Street about additional adjustments for the New York stock market.
You're seeing consumer delinquencies starting to build up. You're seeing fiscal stimulus wearing off. So there are a number of factors that would suggest to us that the global economy, the U.S. included, is going to slow down a little bit.
On the other hand, as the U.S. economy shook the global financial market by provoking a stock price crash due to fears of a recession, all eyes are on whether the Fed will successfully execute a soft landing. According to the Financial Times, most economists believe that the U.S. will still achieve a soft landing despite rising unemployment. Jason Fernan, former Council of Economic Advisors chairman under President Obama and Harvard Kennedy School economics professor, said that talk of heading into a recession is dramatically overstating how much is understood about the economy. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Korea's female table tennis team players are advancing to semifinals, warming up for some tough matches ahead. Lee Seung-jae covers the event and more.
The South Korean women's table tennis team is closing in on a chance to add another medal in the sport for the country. The trio of Shin Yu-bin, Chun Ji-hee, and Lee Eun-hae cruised past Sweden 3-0 in the quarterfinals of the women's team event to advance to the semifinals. However, their next match won't be an easy one. South Korea will play the winner of the quarterfinal match on Wednesday between China and Chinese Taipei, as the top-ranked China is favored to win. China boasts the top 3 singles table tennis players. But even if Team Korea loses in the semifinals, it'll have a chance in the bronze medal match to win its first Team Olympic medal in 16 years. And just like the women's team, the men's team also cruised to the next round, beating Croatia 3-0 in the first knockout round. The trio of Chang Woo-jin, Cho Dae-sung, and Im Jong-hoon defeated Croatia in straight sets, advancing to the quarterfinals. But advancing to the medal rounds will be tougher for the men's team, as they're set to face off against the table tennis powerhouse China in the quarterfinals. Since the men's team event's Olympic debut in 2008, China has won every gold medal so far. Over on the men's 3-meter springboard event, South Korea's Woo Ha-ram and Lee Jae-kyung advanced to the semifinals on Tuesday, with the top 18 divers out of a pool of 25 advancing to the next round. Woo finished 12th, while Lee finished 16th. who finished fourth in the event during the last Olympics in Tokyo, the best Olympic performance by a South Korean diver. South Korea will look to add a few more medals over the next few days with Taekwondo and women's golf competitions starting on Wednesday. Taekwondo will begin with the lightest weight class at under 58 kilograms, as Park Tae-jun is considered a medal hopeful. Meanwhile, former world #1 Ko Jin-young and 6-time LPGA Tour winners Kim Hyo-ju and Yang Hee-young will be competing in the women's golf tournament on Wednesday. South Koreans failed to medal in the last Olympics in Tokyo. South Korea currently has 11 gold, 8 silver, and 7 bronze medals in Paris, with the chance to add a few more to their tally. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Staying with the Paris Summer Games, South Korean archers have once again proven they are the best, having swept gold medals. Behind this incredible result were careful, unseen efforts. Choi Soo-hyung takes a closer look.
In this Summer Olympics, Korean archery won gold medals in all 5 events, coming first in the men's and women's team events, individual events, and the mixed team event. Those results mean Team Korea has maintained its dominance in the Olympic women's team event, where it has won gold at every Olympics since Seoul 1988, when the event was first introduced. The men's team also secured a 3rd consecutive team victory following wins in Rio de Janeiro and Tokyo. Why is Korean archery the best in the world? First, the Korea Archery Association has supported the athletes with a meticulous management system. It's often said that becoming a national team member is harder than winning an Olympic gold medal because the national team selection is based purely on objective scores. As a result, top athletes with remarkable abilities continue to be nurtured across generations. In addition, Hyundai Motor Group, which has been supporting archers with innovative technology for 40 years, played a significant role. For this Summer Olympics, they created self-adjusting shooting robots, serving as a practice partner for Korea's world-class archers and helped them maximize their abilities. The robots automatically calculate wind, temperature, and humidity and demonstrate a high accuracy rate with an average score of 9.65 points, allowing athletes to train as if in real competition. Customized 3D printed bow hand grips were provided to each athlete to ensure the most comfortable draw, and a camera-based heart rate sensor monitors the athlete's conditions. To ensure perfect preparation, the Korea Archery Association created a replica of the Esplanade de l'Invalides Stadium in Paris, where the archery events took place. As l'Invalides is located right next to the Seine River, they also conducted wind speed training near the Namhangang River, which has similar wind conditions. The Archery Association is now preparing for the next chapter of Korean archery at the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics in the U.S. with the best systems and support in place. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, the man who planned the October 7th assault against Israel has been named as the new leader of Hamas amid heightened tensions in the region. Bae Yoon-ji has more.
Hamas has chosen Yahya Sinwar as its new leader to replace Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in a presumed Israeli strike in Iran. 61-year-old Sinwar is seen by Israel as the mastermind behind the planning and execution of the October 7th attack, when Hamas killed more than 1,000 people and took over 200 others as hostages. Sinwar has not been seen in public since the devastating attacks, defying Israel's attempts to kill him since the start of the war. The appointment of the new Hamas leader comes as Israel braces for a likely attack from Iran and Iranian-backed Lebanese group Hezbollah. Iran has reportedly vowed to carry out a revenge attack against Israel over Haniyeh's killing in Tehran, and Hezbollah also threatened to retaliate in response to the killing of its military commander by Israel last week, without specifying the form or timing of the attack. While Israel remains on alert, the U.S. says it does not believe Iran or Hezbollah has taken retaliatory action against Israel yet, as Washington continues to make efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East.
Last night, I do want to add that while we do not believe the response has started yet, we remain concerned by the increase in violence, including the firing drones by Hezbollah into Israel.
Amid growing fears that the situation could escalate into an all-out regional war, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said ceasefire negotiations have now reached a final stage, and that Washington is working with Egypt and Qatar to finalize an agreement as soon as possible. Arirang News.
In the U.S., Vice President Kamala Harris has tapped Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for the presidential race. Meanwhile, recent polls appear to show Harris leading over Trump. Choi Min-jung has the details.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has chosen Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota as her running mate. Walz was chosen from half a dozen Democrats on Tuesday morning after Harris held in-person interviews with the candidates. The two made their first campaign appearance together at a rally in Philadelphia later in the day, where Harris introduced Walz as the vice president America deserves.
Because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves.
Harris also highlighted Walz's political record as one that ticks the boxes in supporting her goal to fight for the middle class. Harris noted that Walz was the first governor in the U.S. to sign a law enshrining abortion as a right, paid leave for women, and voting rights. It was also noted that her running mate expanded background checks and increased penalties for sales of illegal firearms. One expert says Walz's diverse blue-collar background makes him somebody who could be quite popular.
He worked as a high school social studies teacher. He coached football in Minnesota before getting into politics. He has a military background with the U.S. Army National Guard. So, too, he worked as a member of Congress for Minnesota before taking over as Minnesota's governor in 2019. So he knows the legislative side and the executive side. So even though
At Tuesday's rally, the VP candidate took aim at his competition, J.D. Vance.
I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see.
Meanwhile, recent polls show that Harris is moving ahead of Trump in the presidential race. Numerous national head-to-head polls, including Survey USA and NPR PBS News, put Harris up 3 points ahead of Trump in the early August period, at around 48% to 45%. CBS News made it a 1% lead for Harris. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Back here at home, rival political parties have been engaged in fierce confrontation in recent weeks. But today, the rival parties' chief policymakers sat down for collaborative efforts on people's livelihoods. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
A bipartisan body for joint policy discussion. That's what the rival parties called for in unison on Wednesday, over 2 months into the 22nd National Assembly, which has so far passed 0 pieces of mutually agreed legislation on people's livelihoods. The ruling People Power Party floor leader Chu Kyung-ho urged what he called a ceasefire of political strife and said that working-level negotiations to form a consultative group between the rival parties and the government, something he's previously suggested, will begin immediately. This following the main opposition Democratic Party floor leader Park Chan-dae's comment earlier in the day, calling for a prompt formation of a standing consultative body to, quote, overcome issues concerning the economy and people's livelihoods. These intentions highlighted by Wednesday's first ever meeting between the party's chief policymakers in the current assembly.
We will put in efforts to possibly process negotiable bills that can be accepted by both parties for the sake of people's livelihoods.
We think that the legislations, where there aren't large differences in opinion between the parties, can be quickly processed.
They mentioned common ground, especially in childcare, housing, and necessary improvements to the current Nursing Act, heavily debated in the previous assembly, sharing a mutual will to continue fine-tuning legislative details for speedy lawmaking.
Despite all this, there is potential for further political strife in the August assembly, as it faces issues the parties are far apart on, including the additional contentious hearing on the country's broadcasting watchdog coming up in the next few days. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Another round of applications for trainee doctors will start this Friday amid the prolonged medical dispute. The Health Ministry stated on Wednesday that this decision comes amid efforts to provide an opportunity for trainee doctors to return. The ministry added that this would be their last chance to return as the training period starts in September. The recruitment process is to be completed by the end of August. Recruitment for the second half of this year originally closed last month, but the application rate was only at around 1%. Out of the 5,700 that resigned since February, just 91 trainee doctors applied during the previous recruitment round. Samsung Electronics has addressed speculation that a version of its fifth-generation high-bandwidth memory chips has passed Nvidia's tests for use in its artificial intelligence processors. Samsung says that the verification tests are still underway, with major clients effectively denying the claims, while Nvidia has declined to comment. On Wednesday, a Reuters report cited anonymous sources saying that the two companies will soon sign a supply deal for the South Korean tech giant's 8-layer HBM3E chips, with deliveries expected to start by the fourth quarter of 2024. Since last year, Samsung has been striving to meet Nvidia's chip standards to compete with local rival SK Hynix in the AI memory chip market. Hyundai Motor Group won 17 Newsweek Autos Awards this year, marking the highest number of these awards the group has ever won. Kia has won 8, Hyundai 6, and Genesis 3. The awards were given out in 13 categories based on consumer purchasing behaviors. Hyundai's Elantra was recognized as the best vehicle for first-time new car buyers and the top pick for urbanites, while Kia's Sportage was recognized as the best car for commuters. Hyundai Motor Group recorded the most awards for 3 consecutive years from 2021 to 2023 at the awards. This year, it tied for the lead with Toyota.
Today's Ip-chu, which marks the traditional beginning of autumn, but the season began with scorching heat. With a heatwave warning in place in most parts of the country, it will be very hot tomorrow as the feels-like temperature rises to around 35 degrees Celsius. Please drink plenty of water to prevent heat-related illnesses. In addition to the heat wave, we need to be prepared for showers. It's going to rain in the central parts of the country. There will be showers in the south and on Jeju Island. Tomorrow morning will be as hot as today in most parts of the country. Daytime temperatures will move up to 33 in Seoul, Chuncheon, Gwangju, and Jeju. Daegu and Busan, 34 degrees. For the time being, the heat wave will continue with high humidity nationwide. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.
껍데기는 가라, 알맹이만 오라. 그래서 플라스틱이나 일회용 포장지로 이렇게 둘러싸여 있잖아요. 그 껍데기를 치우고 알맹이만 리필하자는 의미에서 그래서 무포장 제품들을 판매하고 있습니다. 좋은 점은 자기가 원하는 만큼만 살 수 있다는 거예요. 비우고, 헹구고, 분리하고 이런 과정을 거치지 않아도 되는 거죠. 저희 손님들이 자기 용기를 사용해서 새 플라스틱을 줄인 이제 1년 결과를 내보면 거의 10만 개 정도 플라스틱 공병을 10만 개 정도 아끼거든요. 그래서 이런 가게들이 많아지면 새 플라스틱 사용도 줄이고 쓰레기가 될 물건들도 구조해서 재활용시킬 수 있는 거죠. 우리가 플라스틱을 배출한 다음에 얘들이 어떤 루트를 타고 어떻게 재활용이 되거나 버려질까 이걸 직접 눈으로 보고 싶어하는 쓰레기 덕후들이 이제 저희 주변에 많아요. 보시고 난 전후가 다르다. 굉장히 쓰레기를 보는 자세, 쓰레기를 어떻게 줄일지에 대해서 획기적으로 자기 자세가 바뀌게 됐다. 이런 말씀 되게 많이 해주셔서 힘을 내서 매달 하고 있습니다. 사실 낯서니까 힘들어하시는 것 같아요. 낯서니까 더 불편하고 힘들다고 생각하실 텐데 여기 오실 때는 가벼운 마음으로 오시면 됩니다. 저희 손님들이 기증을 해주신 깨끗한 용기를 저희가 한 번 더 소독을 해요. 그다음에 쫙 무료로 비치하기 때문에 그냥 오시면 되고요. 오셔서 이제 무게를 재는 방법들은 저희가 다 설명을 해드릴 거예요. 나는 알맹이만 담는 그리너입니다.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Hyundai in Seoul. Tensions continue to mount on the Korean peninsula with the two Koreas each bolstering their nuclear capabilities. North Korea has recently held a ceremony marking the delivery of 250 nuclear-capable missile launchers to frontline units, where Kim Jong-un called for a ceaseless expansion of the North Korean military's nuclear program to counter U.S. threats. South Korea, meanwhile, conducted a first-of-its-kind tabletop exercise with the U.S. to enhance response to North Korea's nuclear attack. All this as North Korea rejected South Korea's offer of flood damage relief, saying an enemy remains an enemy. For an in-depth analysis of these developments and more, our regular commentator, Dr. Ko Myung-hyun, joins me in the studio. It's always great to have you with us.
It's always nice to be back.
And with us virtually from Washington, D.C. is Bruce Klingner, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Dr. Go, let's start with you. Let's first discuss the specifics of these missile launchers. What type are they? What is their capacity? And how big of a threat would it pose to the South Korean military if fully deployed along the border?
Well, it's going to be a major threat because we're talking about a massive number of new missile launchers. These launchers can carry the so-called Hwasong-11. Essentially, this is a very short-range ballistic missile. So, in fact, the range is so short, we're talking about a maximum range of 110 kilometers. So we couldn't even call it a very large artillery. So essentially a form of a multiply launched rocket system. But then in contrast to the typical multiply launched rocket system, it tends to be more conventional in nature. This type of missiles can carry, even though it has a short range, can carry a nuclear warhead. So what North Korea is essentially saying is that they can deploy up to 250 nuclear-capable short-range ballistic missile. So the idea here, or like the message that North Koreans are trying to imply by staging this kind of show of force, is that, first of all, they have the capability to build 250 nuclear warheads. That if they indeed have that kind of capability, they will say that North Korea has probably more nuclear warheads than France. I mean, France has 300, so close to the French nuclear capability and arsenal. And second is that if they can launch these 250 nuclear-tipped tactical ballistic missiles at once and simultaneously, it can easily overwhelm any kind of defense that South Korea and the United States can mount against this kind of attack. So, in fact, I mean, you have to look at the timing of this show of force. This is very much coupled with what's going on right now in the Korean Peninsula. Well, what's going on is that there's the Ulchi freedom exercise taking place. So what North Koreans have timed this action to send a message to South Korea and the United States that they have a form of attack that can overwhelm any kind of defense that the two countries can mount together against this kind of threats.
So it sounds like it could pose quite a serious threat to the South Korean military.
But then there's a caveat here. North Korea hasn't been testing this kind of short-range ballistic missiles very often since last year, especially after September last year when Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un had their summit in Vladivostok. So the reason is because North Korea is sending all their surplus missiles. In fact, the brand new produced missiles to Ukraine right now to be used by the Russian forces. So the chances that North Koreans don't have this number of tactical ballistic missiles to be deployed anytime soon. So in that sense, this is more of a empty show of force on the part of North Korea.
So it could be quite a big of a threat to the South Korean military, but whether North Korea will actually be able to fully operate those launchers remains to be seen.
Exactly.
Dr. Klingner, marking the delivery of the missile launchers, Kim Jong-un vowed to continue boosting North Korea's nuclear program to counter U.S. threats. He added the U.S. that the U.S. North Korea confronts is not just an administration that remains in power for a few years, but a hostile state the North has to counter generation after generation. What are you reading into these remarks?
Well, after former President Trump told the Republican National Conference that he had a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un and that Kim probably misses him and wants him to win the election, North Korea responded by saying, well, they don't care which U.S. presidential candidate wins the election, and that both of them represent the continuation of U.S. hostile policy toward North Korea, which has continued for successive administrations. But sort of reading between the lines of North Korea's statement, they said if the U.S. wanted to prove that it didn't have a hostile policy and therefore Pyongyang might be willing to come back to negotiations, Washington would first have to cancel bilateral military exercises with South Korea, cease the rotational deployment of strategic or nuclear-capable assets to the peninsula, such as bombers and aircraft carriers and submarines. Then Pyongyang might be willing to talk with the United States. Now, Trump had canceled those military exercises and the rotational deployment of strategic assets during his presidency. So he may be willing to once again cancel that, which did degrade Allied deterrence and defense capabilities after he had done so. And then he may be more amenable to, if North Korea were reach out to have a peace declaration or a peace treaty negotiations, he may see that as a very positive development and that it would be very unique and never been accomplished, perhaps leading to a Nobel Peace Prize. My concern with that would be you first need to reduce the North Korean strategic missile and conventional force threat to South Korea, Japan, and the United States before signing a peace declaration.
So the North Korea, as you pointed out, previously mentioned that it doesn't care who wins the U.S. presidential election. And it also mentioned that no matter who takes power, U.S. will remain a hostile state. But in fact, Kim Jong-un is actually watching the election very closely. And he also may be aiming to have a second chance with Trump to have direct negotiations with him to get what he wants. And staying with you, Dr. Klingner, South Korea and the U.S., meanwhile, boosted their joint nuclear capabilities by holding their first joint tabletop exercise dubbed the Iron Mace 24. Tell us about its significance.
I think it is significant because it's a continuation of an ongoing process, really, of the past year and a half, where the U.S. has become much more transparent about its nuclear strategy, its nuclear policy in defending South Korea against a North Korean nuclear attack, as well as overall military attack. We've seen the process with the Nuclear Consultative Group, which was initiated as another way of trying to incorporate North Korea into the overall U.S. war plans, particularly the nuclear aspect of it, and to reassure our South Korean ally that we are working closely together. So it's a continuation of a process. We saw that in June and July, the U.S. and South Korea agreed to guidelines for the use of U.S. nuclear weapons and the defense of South Korea. And a particular emphasis on this tabletop exercise was what's called conventional nuclear integration, or CNI, where it's incorporating South Korea's conventional forces along with the U.S. nuclear and conventional forces and missile defenses to improve the overall deterrence and defense capabilities of the alliance. So the exercise was the first that simulated or incorporated scenarios where the North was threatening and then carrying out nuclear attacks on the South, and then the ally discussed how they would respond to that. So the details, of course, remain very highly classified and not public. But I think it's a continuation of this process, not only to deter North Korea, but also to reassure South Korea of the U.S. commitment to fulfill our treaty obligations.
As you mentioned, it's their first ever tabletop exercise on integrating Seoul's conventional forces with Washington's nuclear capabilities. And it goes in line with continual efforts made by the Nuclear Consultative Group, or NCG, aimed at boosting nuclear deterrence in various ways. Now, Dr. Go, South Korea and the U.S. will also conduct Ulji Freedom Shield exercise later this month, a large-scale annual drill aimed at bolstering the two allies' joint joint defense posture. Now, Pyongyang has long been quite sensitive to the UFS drill. What sort of reaction do you anticipate from the North this time around?
We're already seeing this with the North Korea's mounting this show of force by showcasing their 250 missile launchers. So it goes exactly to what Bruce just explained, which is North Korea is very much concerned about this CNI, the conventional nuclear integration. That's an implementation which been promised last year with the launch of the nuclear consultative group. So in essence, it's telling North Koreans that North Korea doesn't enjoy, so to speak, a limited nuclear monopoly over South Korea any longer, because the United States is putting in the table its nuclear capability to defend South Korea against the North Korea's nuclear threats. So essentially, even though the United States government, for a lot of strategic reasons and also as political reasons, doesn't want to say this loud, essentially it's answering North Korea's nuclear threats with nuclear response. And this cancels out North Korea's nuclear advantage over South Korea. And paradoxically speaking, North Korea lashing out against South Korea and the United States in a negative way, but it's threatening South Korea and the United States that whatever defensive measures the two countries can put on the table will be essentially neutralized by North Korea's new forms of threats and measures of attack. It's a paradoxical proof that South Korea and the United States have finally put on the table an effective measure to respond to North Korea's nuclear threat. And this isn't just the beginning stage. I would say if North Korea mounts more threats and showcase a higher level of nuclear development and missile systems, and South Korea and the United States have already in each arsenal, or joint arsenal, a lot of effective measures to counter those. So I think North Korea is concerned, and then they probably understand that their window of opportunity in which they enjoy this strategic and military advantage over South Korea is closing fast. So I think we're going to see much more hectic response and behavior on the part of North Korea in the coming months and probably up till next year. And also we'll see more diplomatic action on the part of North Korea.
And some experts are also predicting quite serious, high-level, high-risk provocation around the U.S. presidential election, but we'll discuss that later on. Dr. Klingner, northwestern parts of North Korea along the Amnok River were hit hard by recent downpours, and we saw rare photos of Kim Jong-un boarding a rubber boat to inspect the impact of devastating floods. But North Korea rejected aid offers from both Russia and South Korea, although it showed a much more friendly stance toward Russia when doing so. What is the estimated damage, and how do you interpret North Korea's subsequent actions?
Well, it appears that thousands of houses have been flooded, that railroad and road bridges have been washed away, which could impact North Korea's economy because some factories are isolated from the surrounding area. The washing away the bridges could even impede North Korea's providing artillery and missiles to Russia because the transportation system has been impacted. Thousands of North Koreans have been stranded. Some 5,000 people were stranded in Sinwiju because of the flood. So it does seem like it's some extensive damage. And that's exacerbated by the deforestation, which is occurring in North Korea as people try to cut down trees for fuel, especially during the winter, and also the very dilapidated infrastructure in North Korea. So by having Kim go to the area, and they're trying to, the North Korean media is trying to hail him as sort of a hero, or certainly trying to rescue and help the North Korean people. And he's deflecting criticism of the situation by punishing or criticizing North Korean officials for negligence, even though really the problem is with the very poor condition of North Korean infrastructure. So as Kim focuses on building up the military rather than attending to the needs of his people, he doesn't want to be criticized for that. And then we did see North Korea rejecting all aid, not only from Russia, but also from South Korea and China, but certainly a different depiction. Overall, they're saying, no, we can handle this. We don't need help from the outside world. But they were much politer in their response to Russia, sort of emphasizing the growing and strengthening relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang, and then criticizing South Korea's offer of aid as, calling the situation much worse than it actually was, even though it does seem to be fairly dire. So they want to emphasize that North Korea can handle any problem, but also at the same time wanted to thank President Putin and emphasize the growing relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow.
Now to North Korea at the Paris Olympics, Dr. Gov't. The Hermit Kingdom sent 14 North Korean athletes to the global sporting event, and we caught a rare glimpse of North Korean athletes mingling with other players from different countries. What caught your attention, and how do you analyze North Korea's sports diplomacy?
Well, North Korea has already used this kind of events, the Olympics and the major sporting events, as a way to send a message to the international community. Just the mere fact that North Korea sent a delegation to participate in the Olympics is important, I would say, step forward. North Korea was very closed down during the COVID pandemics, and then there was some fear that North Korea is paranoia about external information, and also there's germs coming from the outside that would remain recluse. But then they are participating, and I think in itself is a message. And nothing is spontaneous about North Korea's demonstration of friendship or even smiles. This is essentially, I would say, a political gesture on the part of the regime. They are so I think, but then behind this friendliness that the North Korean athletes are showing in Paris, there's a clearly dichotomy here. So they are friendly, the athletes are friendly towards international peers, but then apparently they are shying away from interacting with their South Korean peers. So I think this is a message that follows what Kim Jong-un has been saying since last year, which is the two Koreas are totally separate entities, as if they are totally foreign to each other. And I think North Korea, in a way, deliberately continue with this message. But at the same time, I think the fact of the matter is North Korea is probably preparing the ground for a diplomatic outreach to other countries later this year. We have to take into consideration the political calendar in other countries, especially in the United States. We know that Kim Jong-un had a good relationship with former President Donald Trump, and Donald Trump claims the same. And this is an opportunity for North Korea to have another major diplomatic success at the heels of what they achieved with Russia. So Kim Jong-un recently hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin in Pyongyang, and it's totally natural for Kim Jong-un to have the same ambition of hosting Donald Trump if he indeed is able to return to the White House next year. So I think they are setting the stage for this kind of a diplomatic campaign later this year. But then it all hinges upon whether Kim Jong-un's former quote-unquote friend Donald Trump can make his return to the White House.
Dr. Klingner, South Korea's defense chief Shin Won-sik has recently stated that he's not ruling out the possibility of North Korea conducting its 7th nuclear test around the U.S. presidential election in November. How do you assess the likelihood of the test actually happening?
Well, some experts have asserted that North Korea always does something very provocative, either a nuclear test or a missile test or a long-range missile test during a U.S. and a South Korean election year. That is, except when they don't do that during an election year. So some have speculated that North Korea may explode a 7th nuclear test during, say, October to try to influence the U.S. election, perhaps to increase the chances that President Trump would return to office. But I don't really see much of an impact on the U.S. electorate. I think the voters have already made their choices, or if they're still undecided, it's not going to be determined by what North Korea does or doesn't do. Also, we don't know if Defense Minister Shin's comments were based on actual intelligence information or just speculation. And, for about 2.5 years ago, both Washington and Seoul said that a 7th nuclear test was imminent, and obviously that hasn't happened. So we expect that another test, whenever it occurs, would not be a repeat of the very large nuclear weapon test that they did in 2017, but instead would be a very small nuclear test because it would be testing these very short-range tactical nuclear warheads, the kind of which we saw for the 250 missiles that were just rolled out. So, a nuclear test wouldn't necessarily affect the U.S. election, but it would be another indication of the very real and growing nuclear and missile threat to South Korea, as well as Japan and the United States.
And very quickly before we let you go, Dr. Go, we are running a little short on time. Germany joined the U.S.-led United Nations Command in South Korea last week, becoming the 18th nation of the UNC, built to police the world's most heavily fortified border. What's behind Germany's somewhat sudden and belated decision to join the UNC, and what does it mean for the two Koreas?
Well, it happened just now, but then the discussion about allowing Germany to join the United Nations Command was taking place since the Moon Jae-in presidency. At that time, President Moon Jae-in refused to allow Germany to join the UNC because at the time there was a concern that United Nations Command could become an alternative way of the U.S. forces in South Korea to remain in command of the overall defense and posture of the peninsula. But now I think with President Yoon, he's very much in favor of strengthening the UNC because he wants to highlight the fact that North Korean threat is not just limited to South Korea, but it's global. So I think this is going to set the stage for other countries to join the UNC down the road.
All right, and we'll conclude our discussion there. Thank you, as always, Dr. Go, for your perspectives.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you, Dr. Klinger, for your insights.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day,